Welcome to the Mrs. R Relevant Daily Draft Podcast. It is the return of Newt Weston. Newt, it is really good to see you. Owen is taking care of some technical challenges. It's becoming what we're going to call it, like a theme.
This week was my error, though. Yesterday was Mowgli trying to sabotage mine and Jerry's podcast.
Man, that cat gets thrown under the bus so damn much by you. Does he know how much you blame him for stuff?
Listen, he is the derpiest cat you'll ever see in your life. I don't know if he has much going on between those ears, so even if I told him, I don't think he'd understand.
He single-handedly stopped the podcast last year, so
yes.
I mean, like he puts on that look, but he's got some plans behind what's going on for that derp.
I'm more surprised it's not. I have two cats, and my other one is like the genius of the two, where he like knows how to open doors. When he's hungry, he knows exactly how to. Because I sleep like a log, he makes my wife mad, so that when she has to get up and wake me up to go feed him. So he knows all the little tips and tricks to what makes each of us mad individually. He's the genius one. Mowgli is the one that's just kind of happy to be here. Can I just be pet by everybody? I'll meow all the time when you're yelling at your microphone. Milo is the other one who just kind of exists and hangs out, but he's secretly plotting the destruction of all of us.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah, and I'm sure everybody tuned in so that we can talk about Owen's cat.
I mean, why would you not?
Yeah, so this is funny, right? So, like, Owen and Newt are wearing Draft Professor shirts. I'm wearing Newt's Zero Tech shirt. This is the original band back together, 3 original Draft Professors right here. And we're going to be talking about some defensive line prospects. And, I guess let's just kick it off. Why not?
Hell yeah.
So we're going to go through these 8 defensive linemen. Cole Brevard from Texas, Santana Hopper from Tulane. Shout out to Hank. David Oki from Arkansas. Grayson Holton from Oklahoma. TJ Guy from Michigan, shout out to Owen. Owen liked him in the summer. Malachi Lawrence from UCF, shout out to Hank again. That's one of Hank's guys. Mateen Ibaragba from Wake Forest, shout out to James Foster for bringing him to our attention. And then we're going to close out the show with Cassius Howell from Texas A&M. So I guess just, no drum roll needed. Cole Brevard, Newt, what do you have?
This man makes his own drum roll when he hops out on the field and starts running around because he's a big boy. Cole Brevard, he is going to be, filling that role of the middle of the Texas defense that for the last couple years has been just really, really well manned. And you think of and you take a look at that Texas defensive line and you're thinking of a lot of talent that comes off of that. So if you take a look, he was at Penn State, I think, to start his collegiate career. Went to Purdue for 3 years, and now he's at Texas, transferred there this spring. He's got a lot of college snaps under his belt, comes in as a redshirt senior, so he's over 1,400 snaps, almost 400 his last year at Purdue. He's going to be your true zero tech, that middle of the defensive line. You take a look at odd man fronts. They're going to love this guy because of what they can do with him in terms of being able to put someone right in the middle of a defense and have them be able to two gap and really clog up the interior offense and what they're trying to do up the middle. For Brevard, I liked what I saw given his size. So at that 346, I think he's plays pretty quick. There's a snap I saw of him where he's able to get hands on the center shoulder, rip him aside, and really push the pocket in a phenomenal way. I think he eats double teams up well, which is what you want from that, and does the baseline of what you want to see in run defense. I don't see a ton for him after that, which isn't uncommon when you look at a guy his size along the defensive line. For me, he's more likely an early down run defender. The explosion for pass rush just isn't necessarily there. And the other thing was I didn't love, while he kind of eats up double teams well, like you'd expect, I don't think he has a ton of play strength that he offers beyond that anchor ability. I think he knows how to dig in really well, but he's not going to be a guy that's bullying interior offensive linemen like I would like to see at his size. And he doesn't have a ton of pass rush moves. I've seen it like very sparsely here or there, but he's a guy that I think he needs to add something to his game if he is going to find success at the next level. Because right now he has that baseline of what you want. The problem is there's a handful of other guys out there that can give you that. And for him to really stand out and be someone that's an impactful player and not more than just trying to like find a roster spot, I think he's got to add some play strength. He's got to add something in the pass rush game. Right now I've got him with like an early day 3 grade. I like him and I like what he offers, but I think there's a lot that he leaves on the table, especially with the frame and with what he can do already as a run defender.
Yeah, you're going to hear this. This whole episode, I think, was just catered towards me specifically, because you're going to hear either this guy wasn't my guy or this guy is now going to become a my guy in this draft cycle, because this whole episode is stacked with guys that I was watching. Be like, oh, wow, damn, I really like him. Oh, damn, I like him even more. Brevard is one of those guys that I covered it in the summer with Jim because I did the Texas preview. And that was when watching his Purdue tape before he transferred over and got his first reps at Texas. And I can tell you, when I first did that preview, I had him projected as like a later day 2 graded player, because at Purdue, he was able to show off a ton of like rare kind of like pass rush moves, and he had like 6 sacks. It was something really impressive about his pass rush game at Purdue specifically. Now, they didn't utilize him really in the correct way. He was playing like 5 tech or like out in like a 4-eye. They had him spread out like all over the place. Kind of like reminded me of when Texas had T'Vondre Sweat, and they would put him out over in some wider alignments. So he had a lot of like really intriguing pass rushing reps at Purdue when utilized in not that stereotypical nose tackle role. But what I saw, or what I said back then, was I want to see him more as the 0 tech, 1 tech, run thumper, hold up at the line point of attack, and be that type of player while still maintaining those pass rush things. I thought he could get even higher than like a 3rd round grade. But unfortunately for me, I think he really dove into that role for Texas this year, where he was going to be the 2-gapper, plugging up double teams. If you leave him one-on-one with another guy, I think he has enough strength in his upper body and core strength to punish you if you leave him one-on-one with an offensive lineman. So you have to send double teams his way. He's not like the best at absorbing them and being able to absorb and then split the double teams, kind of like Newt was talking about. But as a guy that like has that gravity, I'll use a basketball term where they talk about scoring gravity. You have to send doubles at a guy, because if you leave him one-on-one, he's going to dominate you. So you have to kind of draw that attention and free up some of your other players. You can definitely see that, especially with like Anthony Hill this year at Texas, where he's benefiting from a guy like Brevard, who maybe isn't the splashiest player, but if you don't send that help, you're going to give him opportunities to be a bit better with those splash plays. He still does flash some pass rushing plays. I think the one that impressed me the most was on the Michael Taft pick against Florida. He was the one who caused that play to happen. He beat the center clean and then beat the running back helping him. Up right up the middle, easiest pathway to get to the quarterback is straight up through the middle, through the center, beat him clean, affected the throwing motion, and then that allowed it to be underthrown by Lagway and picked off by Taft. So if he can continue to do what he's been doing as his nose tackle run defender at Texas, and then also refine that kind of pass rush upside he had, maybe if Texas can deploy him a bit differently, I think I'll go back to falling in love with him the way I did. But for right now, I had to knock him a bit and get around where Newt is with a high day 3 grade for me right now. Right now, he's just your stereotypical run defender, early down player. But there is tape out there where he's a bit better at pass rush downs that I just fiend to see more of.
I like that, and I take a look. And I think you talk about splitting the double team, and that's really good. So one of the stats that I started to track this summer cycle, and I'm still doing it for now the fall numbers, they're up to date as of this last week, is snaps per loss. So how many snaps do you have to take until you record either a tackle for a loss or a sack? He hasn't had any. And it's just kind of one of those elements where you talk about him not having that or not showing that pass rush juice this year. And also, not being able to break that open. So I can see where you're at with that summer scouting grade and the attention that I would give him if I had seen the same things. But yeah, I think it's just he's got a lot that he still has to do kind of in those categories.
Remind me to send you some of those pass rush clips after this podcast over.
I love seeing a big man get after the quarterback. It's like one of the best things to watch.
And it feels to me like we're going to have a log jam of early day 3, 2-down defensive tackles, because I can think of at least one for Alabama. There's one at Arizona State. So we're going to be going through a lot of day 3 run plugging defensive tackles. There is a few of them in the class.
Yeah, for sure.
So, okay. So the next one is
the complete opposite.
Yeah. So we're going with the exact opposite. And Hank, was all over Twitter, all over the Draft Professor chat on Santana Hopper. Owen, what did you think of Santana Hopper, the defensive tackle from Tulane?
So in previous podcasts, like over the year, me and you have done this.
Over the last decade.
So, yeah. I've made some statements about the easiest way to get to my heart with specific players. Edges, you got to be long and have heavy hands, play through guys. D tackles, I do love those twitched up guys that can make you miss and really get some penetration up front. You can tell I'm a Bills fan by both of those descriptions there. But at my current defense, when I was coaching just this past fall season, the defense I had to run was a 3-3-5. So you had 3 down linemen, including 2 5-techs and a 0-tech. And nothing I love more now after today, which we saw a couple guys that fit this profile, is a 5-tech that absolutely crashes and is able to get off the ball. And that's exactly what Santana Hopper is. So he's another guy that I'm going to be hopping on the train for. He's a dude who's super twitched up. Reminds me a lot of, especially back in that draft cycle with Iowa State, where McDonald, I'm forgetting his first name at the moment, the draft pick for the Jets.
Will McDonald.
He was another guy who was like a 240-pound D end playing as a 5-tech because they ran that 3-3-5 system for Iowa State. I didn't really see it as much with him, but with Hopper, his ability to really maximize his ability in that system where he's getting off the ball, crashing through gaps, shooting those gaps, utilizing his hands. He has a lot of active hands, especially with that double club move to get the guy's hands off of him and then bend around. When he's given opportunities to be more of an even front player, I think it does show up as well. But for a lot of times, especially because he's in the scheme he's in, he has to be able to utilize his hands a lot, get off the ball a lot, which is just indicative of defensive ends as a 5-tech in those schemes. So you either want big, giant 300-pound dudes who can just hold the point of attack with their hands, or guys like Hopper who can move laterally and string out plays and be that C-gap defender if he's going to be crashing that gap, or if you want him to impact the run and slant inside, being able to beat those tackles off the ball and shoot that gap inside to get some pressure. So for me, he fits that mold perfectly. I think in the NFL level, you're going to see a lot more of those 300-pound guys that are going to shade towards, which we have one of those players in this podcast. We'll get to in a little bit. But for me, Hopper as a player that if you want to project him to a base end in like a 4-3 system where he's the strong side defensive end, he has a lot of experience playing with his hands on linemen, using that stack, shed, get off, string out plays as that edge defender, setting a hard edge. So for me, you could probably put him as a 3-3-5 defensive lineman or a 3-4-3 or 3-4-5 or 3-4-4. Jesus, numbers, math. Defensive lineman as a 5-tech.
Throwing out integers.
A 3-4-4 defensive lineman as a 5-tech or as a base end in a 4-3 system. I think he could project there as well because he has such a good floor with his run defending, and his athleticism actually gives you that bump to that ceiling that you're really looking for. So for me, he's a guy that as soon as he gets out of the system he's in and he could be more versatile, he may be a better pro than he is a college player at the moment.
I think it's well said, and that's what I have 4i written down for him. So I completely agree. I think that odd front when you put him as that defensive end, and Hank was all over him, and I didn't get a chance to watch him before that. and getting eyes on him, I totally get it. I mean, the twitch, the short area quickness and agility, the elusivity in his pass rush plan and we're calling him a defensive lineman. He's not going to play anywhere near the guard. He's going to be, well, I shouldn't say near the guard, near the center. He's going to be filling in that 5 gap and playing at that point. So all of that's there. And even with his size, Owen said he sets a really hard edge. It's the size. And like, that's the only thing that is going against him. And it's not even the fact that he's light. It's the fact that he's also short. He's got such a tweener size. I went and looked on Mock Draftable. So he's listed at 265. The lightest defensive lineman in the NFL ever is Kerry Wynn, listed at 266. So that would put him 0th percentile for the defensive line. You should say, okay, yeah, at 265, he's probably going to be playing on the end. But at 6'2", that's like 10th percentile for the weight. So I like the Will McDonald call out with that. It's just I don't know if he's going to have the length to really succeed on the end. I think if you take a look at him in a odd man front, I like that look better. So I like the 3-3-5 call out with that. I think that's the system that he's going to have to be in to succeed. But it's just such an enigma in terms of his size that it makes it really challenging for him to overcome that. Now, the good news is he's doing everything in his power to do that. He has showcased good play strength. He's showcased phenomenal athleticism and the elements that you want to see. Now, with that, I expect that athleticism given his size. His play strength is good given his size, but it's not like the play strength you're going to get from a guy that's got 40 pounds on him. So there's some things that are in between what he does really well because he's that size versus what I want to see done well from a defensive lineman. Now, all that to say, I right now have him kind of around that top 100 conversation. Like, I think he's the kind of player for me that he's definitely, I shouldn't say that. He's definitely in that top 100 conversation. He's like 65th on my board right now, but that's very fluid and outdated as it currently stands. But I've got like a round 3 grade on him. I think he's a player that is going to be able to be impactful. I just don't know, how much that size is going to push him down.
So, couple questions. He has one more year of eligibility left, right?
Yes, he's a redshirt junior.
So, if we had to say, like, there's 3 choices, right? He could stay at Tulane, he could transfer up, or he could declare for the draft. Transferring up is probably his best option, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things I've written down is just, my first weakness needs to continue to show out against higher levels of competition. So that's also a question mark you're going to put there. And that's a conversation, that he would be having with, his family, his agent, his coaches. If you're going to do that, then you're betting on yourself, which I respect. And I absolutely love that mentality. And I think that if he's really looking to push his draft stock and he thinks that he's going to be able to find a large amount of success at the next level, then hell yeah, go and do that, because that's outside of your size, really the only thing that he doesn't have going for him.
Okay. And I guess one other question. So you had mentioned the 0 percentile on the weight. How much data do we have, even that like a 5th percentile weight is drafted on day 1 or 2? Like, does the NFL draft the outliers on day 1 or 2, or does it wait until day 3 for the outliers? Regardless of what the film shows.
It depends on the player, because like you saw like a Kalijah Cansey and a Devonta Smith, like these players that if like they show it on tape enough, the NFL will neglect that percentile difference where it's going to be like, okay, or even like this year, like Will Campbell, 0th percentile arm length and wingspan. Like he's going to be they're going to be players that if they have good enough tape, they'll overlook that. And it does help that they go to those 3 players that isn't mentioned. Now, Kalijah Cansey's at Pitt, but Alabama and LSU, like these higher end schools where they're still, despite those deficiencies, are dominating other NFL competition. I think for me, Hopper, I put out that I think he can still play a 5-tech, but for me, truthfully, honestly, I think he is exclusively an edge at the NFL level. I don't think you can really project him inside anywhere, like maybe an inside shade to a 4-eye if you have like more like a bare front and you just want him to shoot a gap. But for me, he's a guy that, because of his lack of weight and the fact that he's probably actually lighter than 265 if I had to guess. The way he's built, doesn't really look like he's packing that much onto him. But if he can move that well at 265 anyway, like there are teams that will take him and put him in the even front scheme. And the fact that he can get off the ball that quickly and get into blockers, it's going to minimize some of the length issues, especially with teams that maybe have right tackles that aren't as physically gifted as their left tackles if they're still running the operation that way. And I do just think that with his weight class and the way when he did get kind of pushed towards the middle of the field or was asked to be more of an interior presence when it wasn't a pass rush down, he was just dominated by the interior blockers and run defense. So I don't know if there's a world where he exists as an interior defender. I think maybe only on like kicking inside for pass rush downs because he has that experience of going against guards and really just kind of cooking them with his first step. But for me, he has to be an edge and could be a guy that like goes to the edge, and then he's like the biggest wild card factor when it comes to like the combine or something like that, where you're looking to see, okay, where are these measurables? What are his arm? What's his arm length? What is his actual measurements coming in as? If he comes in and clears like those arbitrary thresholds, like he's in the 50th percentile or better at all of those things, I think he's a guy. I have him as the lowest round 2 grade I can give before it becomes round 3 grade. But he's a guy that like if he can clear those arbitrary thresholds, teams will start to look at him even higher than that because he has such strong tape at that level. I don't disagree that going to a higher level of competition, maybe with an even front defense, that they could allow him to play more of his natural position against high level competition. It would benefit him the most. But I think outside of that, number 2 option would probably just to come out now, try to light up the combine and some of those like all-star circuit stuff and make people not have to question whether or not he's in those lower percentiles of body range. And then I think the last one I'd rank there would be just going back to Tulane, running it back with the same system because you've already proven to be able to dominate at that level in that scheme at that point. So there's nothing really much left for him to prove there.
Yeah, and I think if I take a look at him, I don't want the combine measurables to be the end-all, be-all, but if he comes in at the combine at over 6'2", I mean, it can be like 6'2" and an 1/8. I don't really care. But then he's like pushing 33-inch arms. Sign me up. I love it because he's got decent length. He's going to have a decent center of gravity, and he's shown the twitch. Comes in under 6'2", and he's got like 30-inch arms. I think I'm almost out on him at that point just because it is such a bet on such an outlier that I'm not saying I don't think he's draftable, but I think that is a bigger impact than almost anything else. And like the Will Campbell call, it's a really good one because obviously that was such a big conversation last year. But that was, a couple of fractions of an inch. And I know that makes a big difference when you talk about that 33-inch mark. But I think that he had everything else going right for him, where Santana Hopper, to the point you're making, it is a really good one. He, with that frame, pretty much has to play on the outside. I think he can make it as a 4-eye, but he's just kind of weirdly built. And if that length comes in short, I just don't like that.
Yeah, I agree. And I want it to be known before we move on that I'm okay with Santana Hopper. No matter what he measures in the combine, Newt's the one that says size matters. So I just want that on the record. That size matters, quote Newt.
Yeah, go ahead with that one.
With that being said, we are going to flip to another defensive lineman. So I have not heard much about David Oak from Arkansas. Newt, what did you see when you watched it?
I'm glad you said Oak and not Okie because, well, I guess I'm not glad. I'm just glad you said his name first because I was saying David Okie this entire time. But so David Oak out of Arkansas, right now I have him as about fringe as a draftable grade as I can have on a guy. And honest to God, the issue is he just hasn't played any snaps this year. I think he's got one full game under his belt, and that was it Notre Dame? Maybe he's got a Memphis too, but he's battling an injury right now. I think it's a foot injury. I'm not sure, but it's keeping him off the field. He was slow to get on the field this year. Came from Abilene Christian, which he absolutely tore up. And so I've seen a couple of other people in the draftverse really high on him coming into this season, and I think rightfully so. It's just we haven't really gotten a chance to see anything from him this season. And with him being a senior, it's obviously not what he wanted to put out in regards to that. I think that, you talk about him and take a look at it, and you can see 6'2", 312. I like his build. I think it's distributed really well in his lower body. The length overall, when you're talking about a guy that's probably going to live in that 3-to-1 tech, is really, really good. He's going to be, not a freak, but he's going to be someone that checks all the boxes. And I think that with him, the movement skills that he has, or that he has, and he kind of brings to the game they're draftable. But I don't see anything that really pushes him beyond that. I talked about Brevard, and he had the floor of a high run defender. I don't see that as much from David Oak. I don't see really any of the juice that I might have seen from Brevard. And so comparing those two, and Brevard is obviously a little bit of a different player with that more true nose tech type role, where Oak can be a 3 tech and find success there. I haven't really seen a ton from him to make me lean into that. And I don't think he's that great of an athlete. So the injury, the kind of middling skills, and the lack of athleticism really, really push him down the board for me. I have a draftable grade on him. I have a late day 3 grade on him, but not a guy that I was overly impressed with when I took a look at him. But once again, I think he could do a little bit more if he was just able to be on the field. He's definitely a guy, if he's able to, and I don't know the extent of his injury, if he's able to get in the field the second half of the season, I really want to check out some tape on him.
Yeah, so just to put numbers to what we're talking about, he had 8 snaps against Ole Miss in week 3, 23 against Memphis in week 4, and then 31 against Notre Dame in week 5, and he hasn't played any other games outside of that. This is a fun player for me to talk about because he was a guy that, coming out of Abilene Christian, I actually scouted for UB when I was there for the transfer portal, and he was like a no-brainer take for us. He tore up the FCS level, and we pretty much knew that he was quickly going to go into a higher level school than the MAC. So he was a guy that I got eyes on when he was at Abilene Christian, and then when he transferred to Arkansas, I was like, all right, yeah, that's kind of expected. What is interesting for me with him, and before I get into what I saw on those very limited snaps that I was able to watch, he does have a red shirt available to him. So he's only played in 3 games so far this season. If he doesn't take another snap the rest of the year, he could redshirt and come back and play at Arkansas again next year as a 5th-year senior. And even if he did take a redshirt that I don't know about from like 2021, which I don't believe he was in college at that point, he could also petition for like an injury redshirt. So I think he does have a potential 5th year if he doesn't come back and doesn't want to like risk it and wants to try to push his draft grade up. But for honest, I saw a lot of what Newt was talking about. He has some good movement skills and good twitch, even playing through that injury for a guy who's 310 plus. I see him a lot more as like a run stuffer kind of player, especially when he got to the SEC level and that limited action he had. Like Abilene Christian, he did a lot of that as well, but he did have some juice when it came to pass rush and getting in the backfield and being a disruptor. But for so far at Arkansas, he's in the limited action he's gotten. He's been more so just doing his role, keeping the line of scrimmage, keeping that point of attack, and then getting off and attacking. So there's not a lot you can really take away from what he's done so far because he's been playing through that injury. But for so far, again, I also have him as like a late day 3 guy. Currently the lowest graded defensive tackle I have on my board just because he's so few snaps and what you can't pull out of it. It just isn't the best tape. So I'm not gonna try to pull out a full evaluation out of this. I hope he does go back to school for one more year because I think he could be a guy that, with those talents and that size that kind of comes naturally to him, what he did show when he was fully healthy, he could be in store for a better season if he can stay healthy the whole time. So I'm hoping he goes back, but if he came out right now, I think you'd still see him picked up as like a developmental one tech kind of guy in the later end of the draft there. So I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I am a fan of his name because I have to pull up my knowledge of Magic the Gathering, and here always whenever I saw him, it reminded me of Oko, Thief of Crown. He's a planeswalker in that game. So there's my nerd side slipping out for you.
So, Owen, I know from you covering Oklahoma twice, right? Because you covered Oklahoma with the team preview, and then you covered, I believe, the Oklahoma-Michigan game or one of the other, maybe Oklahoma-Auburn. I know that you do have at least a little bit for Grayson Holton, I believe.
Yeah.
So you want to tell everybody about him?
Of course. So again, way to my heart, be a twitchy kind of penetration style 3-tech defense tackle, and I love you forever. Holden was a guy that I actually, from my preseason grade to now, not much has changed. I think he's dropped maybe like half a point overall, just because I was doing a little bit more projecting in the summer, and now he's kind of just confirmed what I saw. And I'm kind of reeling that back in and balancing that out. But Holden, 6'2", 292, another guy who's going to be like a gap shooting penetrator. Has some pass rush moves in his bag. I'm not going to say he has nothing there. He has a swim move. He has a decent spin move. He's got some moves that when he is getting you on the back foot, he can pull it out and really collapse that pocket. For me, that level of movement ability, and he has some surprising amount of pop in his hands. Like his core strength is not really there when it comes to holding up against like the point of attack. But if he can get his hands on you, especially when he gets out of his stance and he really drives into you, that point of contact when he initially gets out and beats you to the spot, he can actually get a good pop and kind of set that line for there until he gets attacked in the body. So as a guy who can get upfield and kind of attack and doesn't really use his eyes all that great and run defense, I think he could be like a rotational 3-tech. Like he creates disruption, but isn't getting his eyes there to capitalize on it, which is why he doesn't really stuff the stat sheet, even though he is living in the other team's backfield. This is the guy I said earlier that I think is the cleanest projection to a 5-tech D tackle because he is around that 290 to 300 range. And his best traits are the fact that he can get out of a stance, get hands on a blocker, and then stretch that guy out and be able to control that with his hands and play in some more space because he has that athleticism, but he isn't really able to bang in between despite the fact that he has that weight, despite being almost a 300-pound D tackle. So if he was going to be a guy that got drafted and was looking to get the most amount of snaps out of his career, I think the best landing spot for him possible would be a team that has that odd man front where he can develop into a 5-tech. If not, I can also see him being like a bottom of the roster rotational 3-tech, your 5th, 6th tackle on the roster if you run a more even front. But if he wants to eventually make it to an NFL starting lineup or get some reasonable snap contributions, a 5-tech is probably the best projection I can have for him.
And what round grade do you have?
So I have him with a 4th/5th round grade right now.
New.
I hate this. We are agreeing too much on players as this is going. This is weird. I don't know what I can add to this conversation because Owen said it all really well. I actually really like the point that you made about the difference between the strength in his hands versus his core strength. I actually don't like his play strength all that much. He's one of my lowest graded players, but the use of hands that he has is phenomenal. And when you take a look at the way that he's able to combine that quick burst off the line and his use of hands, I really do like him within there. I think that he is going to be a guy that is slightly above average in terms of a lot of those characteristics. And I'm talking about of like all draft eligible players, not guys that are going to be drafted, because I have him right around the same spot, probably like a 5th round grade. But he's going to be a guy that I think he does bring a little bit of pop there. He does bring a little bit of juice. I don't necessarily love him in terms of that middle of the line. I have him as a 3-tech, but because of that lack of strength, I see where Owen's saying by pushing him out to 5-tech. I had spring measurements on him. He was he has 31 and 1/8 inch arms. So I don't necessarily love like that for going up against a tackle if you're going to be, shooting that for a one gap between tackle and guard. But ultimately, if that's going to be, what he can do and bring to a defensive line and really start to show out in an odd man front, I would be, all for that, him making that opportunity. I brought this stat up already with snaps per loss, but once again, I love what he's able to do with that quick twitch and his ability to get off the line. 38 snaps per loss, meaning about probably once a game, maybe not quite that much with him being more of a rotational player, maybe like twice every 3 games, he's getting a sack or he's getting a tackle for a loss, and he's making a big impact there. When you talk about him as being the 3rd best defensive tackle for Oklahoma, I think it shows you, number one, the depth that they have, but number two, what he's able to bring and showcase for a defense. So agree on a lot of those points. Like Grayson Halton, like what I saw from him, isn't a guy that I think is going to splash in the first 2 days, but I think he's got an opportunity to be a player that's a contributing member of an NFL roster.
Cool. Okay, so again, this is one of Owen's guys coming out of the summer. Edge TJ Guy from Michigan. So, Owen, where are you on TJ Guy right now?
So I was a massive TJ Guy fan coming out of the summer, especially after that Alabama bowl game where he just took Caden Proctor to school. Absolutely love that. And I've been keeping tabs on him all season because that was kind of the guy I waved my banner for really early on in the process. So I was kind of keeping tabs on him, seeing him. Brevard was another one of those guys, and some of the MAC players that I really kind of pined for in that one podcast are some of the ones I kept constant updates on. And unfortunately, though, TJ Guy hasn't really lived up to the projections that I really wanted him to live up to. He didn't really continue to exhibit a lot of those pass rush instincts. I don't know if Michigan, just because of how their team has been set up this year, hasn't really had a ton of opportunities for him to just kind of be a pin his ears back, pass rush type of player to win with the length and power and speed he does have. He does have combinations of traits that you really do love, but he hasn't had the opportunity to really show off that bag as a pass rusher and hasn't shown up on the stat sheet either. And then as a run defender, that was always kind of a weak point. I love his energy on run defense. The fact that he's 6'4", 250, and he's willing to throw his body into pullers and jam up the works of the runs blocking. It's something I really admire of him as a player, but technically, especially when you're asking him to use his length to stack, shed, and get off and be a run defender, it's just still not there. And the fact that he lost an edge as a pass rusher, I had to drop him down. I initially had him as a round 2 player that I thought with, the fact that edge is a really high value position, and with the way the position's looking at this year, maybe he could have got bumped up into some first round hype coming into the season. The fact that he just hasn't been able to put together, and the fact he got benched, not really benched, I guess soft benching against Central Michigan because they wanted to play bigger players. So the coaching staff expressed this to him, and he said, I understand completely. I will not play this game, even though he suited up and was dressed and not hurt. He just chose or was just accepted not playing any defensive snaps against Central Michigan. So he's a guy that if he had more eligibility years, I'd be still kind of waving the flag for him. But the fact that he hasn't been able to put it together after such a strong ending to his last season's campaign, I'm back down to maybe a day 3 grade with him, just because he has been able to put it all together as a player. Still someone I would take a flyer on if you're a team that needs some depth role edge rushers that you can give time to kind of cook and stew and mold. But as a guy that can come in and be a day 1 impact, I'm just not there anymore with him.
Just go and check. Same thing. I mean, once again, I hate this podcast so much right now because everything's changing. Everything's an agreement. The production that he had at the end of last year seems to have vanished, and everything that he was able to do just dried up. He went from the first 2 games of the season, starting averaging about 40 snaps per game almost. If you take a look, even against Nebraska, he got the start there. But then the last 3 weeks against Wisconsin, he played 19 snaps. Against USC, he played 15 snaps. Against Washington, he played 17 snaps. He's not the starter there anymore. He doesn't have that, continuation of his progression. And he's a guy that I think Owen said it really well. If this is the point in your career and you're still not putting those things together and building off of that, it's really hard for me to stand behind you and say, yeah, I think he can put it together. I think he can do it, because he's shown flashes. He just hasn't put it together in a sustained effort. So I've got him as an early day 3, just because I like the athleticism that he brings. I think he's got phenomenal length. I think those flashes can be intriguing, and maybe an NFL coaching staff might say, hey, let us get our hands on him and see where we can go from there. But once again, you take a look at that, you're now betting on a projection rather than what he's been able to do. And I think ultimately it, takes what I thought could have been a top 50 guy like Owen and pushes him, round pick, 150, 175, somewhere in that range.
He's the guy that you had to ask me who's the most likely to get drafted by the Eagles or the Commanders with really good defensive line rotations, and he just explodes out of nowhere as a 5th-round pick. He's the guy I'm picking because he had that on film where it's okay, he could be a dominant player. He just hasn't put it together under Michigan right now, and then he could show up in the NFL, have a team that knows how to utilize him well and knows how to coach him up, and now all of a sudden he has 8 sacks his rookie season. You're like, who the hell is this guy? And that's TJ Guy, my guy.
And it's something you take a look. He was Michigan's 2024 most improved player on defense, one of the team awards that they have. We talked about obviously how he played against Caden Proctor in the bowl game last year for the Michigan-Alabama game, and everything's there. But he hasn't had a sack yet this year. I think he's got 1 tackle for a loss. He has a true pass rush win rate of 16%, which that part to me, I'm just floored on when he's got that much athleticism and he's shown already the ability to do that. It's kind of a frustrating watch to be honest.
And it was difficult finding people even tweeting about him. So it didn't surprise me that let's say the snap count or the playing time was down. Another one of Hank's guys is Malachi Lawrence from UCF. Newt, what did you see when you watched Malachi Lawrence?
So Malachi Lawrence was a guy I did not get summer scouting eyes on. He was a name I heard about. And so with that, I wasn't too surprised in terms of seeing a little bit of hype out there, especially from Hank. And some of the things that I looked at with how he was playing for UCF. He's a big dude. He's built the way that you want a 4-3 defensive end to be built. He's got 35-inch arms. He's 263 pounds. Put this guy on the field fresh out of the laboratory, and the size, frame, everything is right there. I think he converts speed to power really well. I like his first step quickness off the line. I think the explosion is good, especially at that 260-pound weight. I think that he's disciplined in run, so he's able to fulfill both of the assignments that you'd like. That's always a huge check for me. I love a DPR, but at the end of the day, if you're not able to be on the field all 3 downs, it's going to be something that I think limits you in terms of where a team is willing to take you at. You have to be phenomenal as a pass rusher or just a brick wall as a run defender to be able to look past the fact that you're not giving that full snap count that you're able to. But I think Malachi Lawrence is able to do that. The power, the speed, all of those elements are there. I don't necessarily love his ability to bend. I don't think that he's going to be the slipperiest player out there. I think he's going to win more with that speed to power, with an inside move, with a bull rush. So he's not going to be like this freaky twitched up athlete that's able to just like bend around the side. And I also it was kind of weird. I saw him struggle with balance. Like against K-State, he was on the ground like 3 or 4 times. And it was something that kind of left me scratching my head. And I was wondering, is this him and the height that he has with that weight or whatever it was a slick field. But it was kind of strange to see. And then the other thing that just bothered me, and I know I'm a little more of a stickler for this than everyone else, but he's got a missed tackle rate of 27%. And as a guy that you're going to want on the field for all 3 downs, you have 35-inch arms and you have a missed tackle rate of 27%. That is terrible. So that's a big thing. And, missed tackle rate, I know that the guys at PFF, they talk about what's a stable metric and not. I know missed tackle rate's not a stable metric, meaning that has the opportunity to change and improve. But it's just something where I don't love it if I'm looking at, hey, what should you be doing? Well, you're a better athlete than a lot of people on the field. You have a freaky build, wrap up the tackle. So that's where I am on Malachi Lawrence. I love the potential that he brings. I love the production that he is putting in right now. It's 4 sacks this year. He's got a stop rate of almost 6%. I've got him right now as a round 2 grade, low round 2 grade, but I got a round 2 grade on him.
So now this is where the podcast gets interesting because we finally get our first disagreement of the draft cycle here.
Yeah,
so
I think he's undraftable. I love it.
I wouldn't go that far, but can I ask which games did you watch on him, Newt? Because I watched 3 games on him, and I'm curious to see
K-State and UNC.
Okay, so I watched UNC, Kansas, and West Virginia. I didn't watch the K-State game, so that's something I'm going to add to my list immediately because for me, he was a player that I got almost an entirely different read on when watching through because for me, and this was I in our private chat to give it a little behind the scenes, I was going to do a superlative to open the show, and I was going to ask the superlative was going to be who is the best single pass rusher of every player we're going to talk about today. If you ask the guys to be like the one-on-one dude, go out and get a bucket, win a pass rush rep of either position, who would be your number 1 guy? And obviously there's a stud on this list that you probably assume to take that we haven't yet gotten to. But for me, Malachi Lawrence was going to be my answer there because especially in that Kansas game and then also the UNC game a bit, I saw a guy that when asked to kind of be more of a freelancer or pin his ears back and be a pass rush specialist, he had a great combination of length, speed, getting off the ball. I did like his bend a bit, especially when it's one of those bends where he's not the guy who can unlock his hips. He's not Von Miller in the way that he can bend, but when he's putting his arm through and ripping through a guy and able using the leverage on that offensive tackle to turn the corner and reduce that space, he's able to do that really well and kind of unlock that as he's leaning on a guy. Which kind of comes from a bit of the fact that he is more of a high cut build, which is why I'm not a big fan of him as a run defender, specifically because he just plays a little high for me and can't really set that hard edge as we want from like a 4-3 play side end. So I saw a lot of he's got the length and the size you want from a 4-3 end. Maybe if he's a weak side player, if you do flip those, or if you're like in a wide 9 scheme, like the 49ers run where you can really give him space to work with, maybe that'll be a better option for him as a run defender on an even front. But for me, I thought one of his best things would be maybe as a designated pass rusher in a 3-4 scheme where you're having him as a walk-up linebacker. And then in run defense downs, he's able to use that kind of speed he has going laterally sideline to sideline to track and attack the run in space as opposed to getting his hands on, setting the edge, getting off, making tackles. So for me, that was where I saw a lot of deficiencies with this game, but I did love his pass rush bag and the way he kind of moved off of stuff, set up things throughout the game. So if he was going to be the guy out of this group that I took it to be a true pass rusher, he would be the player. But the fact that I'm not all the way there with his versatility schematically, as well as just his run defense being a bit lacking for me, and a surprising lack of power for a guy who has that size, in my opinion. Again, I think it's a lot from his pad length or pad height, not being able to out leverage guys. I have him as a 3rd round grade, kind of that more DPR level player, especially in the right scheme. But if you've got him in the right scheme, I think you could end up getting him to be like an all down, every down player. And it's the last thing was I definitely have been looking at missed tackle rates ever since we talked about last year about Derek Harmon and Birch. And I was like, I'm going to be podcasting new. I need to know what these guys' missed tackle rates are because I'm going to be asked what they were. So I knew that was going to be a point of conversation, especially for him. But yeah, I'm not big into taking that as a end all be all metric. But there were definitely plays where like I watch him and I'll be like, okay, he missed a couple tackles in this game. Let's go see what his like actual percentage is. There's 2 guys on this list I did that for. He was one of them. So he was a guy that I definitely think that can be something that's cleaned up as well.
Yeah, and I do want to make it clear, like I'm not saying he's a dominant run defender in any way, shape, or form. And I have written down exactly what you had said. I'm looking for more dominance in that. He plays smart, and I think that's one of the things that does help him out with that. Obviously, I think the length does as well. I get what you're saying with the high cut. And that's probably going to be some of the deficiencies in terms of like that balance and center of mass that I saw. But I don't think that his strength is going to like translate to dominant run defense. Like right now, he is an adequate run defender for a guy that you're going to put out there. He's not like stellar, but he's, for me, and this is kind of where that difference comes in, he's a touch more than DPR. He's going to be a guy that I'm not saying he's going to blow up every running play, but I don't think he's a liability out there, and I'm willing to have him out there on early downs.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. And like I said, I think in the right areas, I think he could be an every down player, especially if you allow him to play in those space a bit more and utilize that length to cover more ground without having to be like the point of attack defender. But for most part, I think he's a guy that we're kind of similar to, and I just wanted to really have that hot take about him being the best pass rusher of this group of 8 here because I know this. Hot take.
I also like how you're like, oh man, we're finally gonna like fight on this, and we have literally a round grade difference.
Okay. 2 more. Oh, okay. We're not doing. There we go. Mateen Ibaragba from Wake Forest. So he was a late add to the podcast. Shout out to James Foster for pointing him out to the draft community. Newt, what did you see when you watched the Wake Forest? And he's a defensive tackle, not an edge.
Yeah, no. So Mateen Ibaragba. I'm going to struggle with that one, but I'm going to get it. I promise. I apologize. Mateen, if you're listening, number one, thank you. But number two, I will get that. It was something where, you had Q Rusa up there. We had the conversation like, he's got the injury. There's like not a timetable in return. He's a redshirt sophomore. Really don't think he's coming out. And you're like, all right, well, let's toss this guy in there. I was like, all right, let's check him out. And I was like, holy shit, this guy is good. And looking at the clips that Foster threw up on Twitter, I actually ended up checking them out after I had watched the NC State game. And like all of the ones that I had been like, oh man, that was awesome. That was awesome. And that was like what Foster was clipping. And so I immediately then understood it and I got it. So he started at Germantown, 0-star recruit, spent 2 seasons there, transferred to Wake Forest 2024, has played there. Now for the last 2 seasons, he was, and like the big thing for him, kind of also putting him on the map, he was one of the PFF midseason All-Americans. And once again, you're listing this off across all of Division I football. So for him to make that list really showcases how he's played this year, and it has been phenomenal. 3 sacks. He's got a phenomenal win rate as a defensive tackle. And we take a look as an edge rusher, I expect for you to have a good win rate, meaning that you're getting past that tackle in, what is it, like 2.5 seconds or 3 seconds, whatever it is. I can't remember the time, but you're getting like what's clocked as a win. 25%, it's like, okay, I like that. 30%, now we're talking. As a defensive tackle, it's like, all right, 15%, that's pretty good. If you're touching 20%, that's all wonderful. He's at 30%, which is, for me, insane. And so I see that, and I want to take a look and like, hey, how is he winning it? And it's technically. He has a really good approach to the game. He understands what he needs to do in order to get defenders off of him. I don't think he's necessarily a guy that is going to have a really good athletic counter move to him, or a move that's going to blow a defender away. But I think he's got a good enough twitch off the line with being 296 pounds. And I think that he understands what he needs to do in order to get that first step win. And if he does that, it's game over. Whether it's in run defense, I mean, like, there are plays where he's blowing up. And the biggest difference between, him and a Halton or a Brevard are he's able to blow up those double teams. He's able to come in and get that first step and really disrupt the play in the backfield that few others in the defensive tackle group are going to do. So I came in, I loved what I saw. I think that he's still got a way that he can grow in terms of some of that technical development, adding in a counter move and some other elements with that. But once again, we're talking about the defensive tackle here. He's a guy that I was very pleasantly surprised by. I have a 3rd round grade on him, and it's not too far off of a 2nd round grade right now. So Metin Ibaragba, really, really liked him.
So while Newt was talking there, I went and found the game notes from UCF versus SMU to find the pronunciation guide for this guy's name, because I knew that we were all saying it wrong for some reason. I did not want to take my chance at it. So just according to the game notes for UCF versus SMU, the way you pronounce Metin's last name is Ibaragba.
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 Yes. So that was I thought that would be a nice little addition to this, because a lot of what Newt was talking about is not a lot of repetition. I'm going to say he's just a guy that he has that size, being near 300 pounds, carries it well, can really explode off the ball. And I think my favorite element of his game was the fact that he was able to shoot and penetrate upfield, but he had that flexibility and bend to kind of peel it back when he's shooting upfield and he's in the back end, but still having that momentum to peel it back upfield and make a tackle for loss even when the play isn't going his way. He's still blowing run plays up by being the guy that's in the backfield and being able to capitalize on that, as opposed to being a guy who has to blow it up every time it's going his way. And if it goes the opposite direction, he just gets upfield and it's like, okay, the play is done for me. I'm just letting it go. He's constantly playing with his hair on fire, chasing plays down, being aggressive, and it works in his pass rush as well. I do think he needs to develop more counters to work off of his elements that he brings athletically. But for a lot of stuff, he's able to beat these guys off the jump, off the snap with his initial move, or just through by being a better athlete. So I do think my comp for him is TJ Sanders from last year, where he was like a guy pushing at 300 pounds, where if he's going to be an impact in the run game, it's going to be through exploding upfield. He has a bit more of that core control and that core strength that some of these other guys. You're going to be more your penetration style 3-techs, because he does have that approaching 300-pound frame. So he's not getting totally blown at the ball, but I'm not expecting him to take on double teams, splitting those double teams by holding his ground. It's going to be more of a guy that has to be in a penetration style front. So a guy that has the size and athleticism to really dominate in games and be a disruptor, but has a lot more to work with and expand upon, and has that ceiling because he has stuff that he can, once he gets to the league, work off of that and not just have to rely exclusively on those athletic upsides, because now he's going to be asked to win more with counters, be more consistent. So I do think there's a high floor with that, but with his ability to then continue to grow as a technician, I do think that is there for Metin Ibaragba. Got it right.
Ibaragba. And then the last player of the podcast, Cassius Howell from Texas A&M, who in one drive managed to get more sacks than Shamar Stewart did his entire last year.
That drive was, I didn't see that game. And I saw that he had 3 sacks when I went to go watch the Utah film. And I was like, all right, I'm curious. You got a 3-sack game. That sounds really cool. And you see it. You see the first sack. You're like, oh, sweet, nice way to get off and push it back. And then you see the second sack. You're like, oh shit, that's damn impressive. Goes back to back, and then he gets the 3rd sack, and it's just like, what did I just witness right here? It was, and and he worked his ass off for them. He just made a fool out of the left tackle for Utah State. I kind of felt bad for the kid at the end of it because it was tough. But man, that was fun to watch.
Yeah, we love our MAC players here on this podcast, especially our former MAC players that finally get the love and attention they deserve because they go to SEC schools. Because I don't know how I have to go back and watch him at Bowling Green because the fact that he looks this elite of an athlete against SEC competition, he was in the MAC for 3 seasons or 4 seasons before that. I need to know what that looked like because he's the guy that I have super highly rated, relatively speaking, because of those traits specifically. He maxes out on his first step, his ability to get lateral. He reminds me a lot of what we wanted from Harold Perkins after that freshman season, where he was just able to bend around edges and be this kind of fly to the ball, persistent attack, getting hog-tied by left tackles, but he's still making the tackle making the sack despite being choked out and drawing a flag at the same time. So he's a guy that you're looking at it and you're like, okay, the athleticism is off the charts here. I love it. But when it comes to everything else about his game, that's where I start poking holes a little bit here. And I think we covered Texas A&M in one of the games previously when I was on the channel here. And we were talking about the dichotomies of him versus I think the Notre Dame pass rusher that I can't remember the name of, who's like 270 and a big like compression style rusher. And Howell is definitely like that type of player that needs to go to a specific situation. I just compared him to Harold Perkins from his freshman year. He's similar to how like maybe the conversation was around Jalen Walker was last year, where he's a guy that if you ask him to be that player to set the edge, play up on the line of scrimmage, he's not going to do that against the run. 248 is the most generous 248 I've ever seen in my life. Like he's probably closer to 230, if not sub that. And the reason why I don't think he's maybe at the edge level of Jalen Walker is because Jalen Walker, despite being on the smaller end, still played with like a ton of length and strength. And while Howell does do that because he just has these tackles in a blender with his athleticism, they have to overcompensate, and he's able to really transition that into taking care of that inside shoulder and transitioning that to some power. If you're going to ask me, is he the most powerful guy out there? Is he the guy who can play with a bunch of length, stretch out blocks, and come off and make tackles on the line of scrimmage? I'm going to say no. I'm going to go a different direction. So that's why I also figured he went back to like that Harold Perkins comp, because if he's going to be a hybrid player between linebacker and edge, or where you want to be a linebacker on early downs, I know he wasn't the best in pass coverage this year when he was at linebacker when they asked him to drop. But then as soon as it's time to bring the pressure and bring a guy in to rush the passer, you can send him off the edge, bring him up have him shoot a gap between the center and the guard, or just go one-on-one with an interior blocker. And he's smoking guys just off of his athleticism. And while he does do that, I do think he needs to add a bit more to his toolkit when it comes to a rush plan. It seems like a lot of times he just knows, like, I'm going to beat your ass. I'm going to do it with this move. If it doesn't, I'm just going to run around you or take advantage of whatever happens. It's not like he's having one move that leads into another that he has, and he's setting up the game-long processes like that. It's more so figure it out on the fly because he's just that special of a talent. So for me, I have him as a second round grade, kind of mid to high second round grade, with when slapping on the positional multiplier, I could see him being definitely a first round drafted player, especially just because of the traits there at a position of a high value position. But he's going to be a guy that needs a team like in Atlanta or a team like a Tampa Bay Buccaneers that runs that kind of off-ball linebacker, but a pass rusher on third downs or pass rush heavy downs to come in and maximize what he does. Because for right now, he's not a guy that translates to a universal amount of schemes.
So, Nate, what do you think?
It's the same. The pass rush is incredible. He would have. I think he is the best pass rusher that we're talking about today. I think the productivity shows it. You know, he's got 8 sacks this year, but I also think just the twitch that he brings, and that's going to be one of the biggest qualifiers for me, is the athleticism and twitch. The strength isn't necessarily there, and it's obviously a result of the frame, which is just it's small. Like, he does not have much mass. He has a shorter build, shorter arms, but man, he gets after it. And if you're going to bring that much twitch and that much productivity to the game, that's when I'll start betting on those outliers. And I know we talked about that. He's not necessarily, 0th percentile, but he's small. But damn, I really do like what he's able to do and the elements that he brings where, you're showing what you can do and you're continuously dipping down game after game and becoming a integral part of this defense and just a productive member that I see the traits, I see the production, and I'm going to take that because those elements right there are going to be two big things that I value and I think that are going to translate really well.
Yeah, if you're a team that can find a spot for him on your defense, he could be an absolute game wrecker. It's just more so, can you hide him on certain downs where you don't want him to be at, or he's not his best specifically. If you are a smart enough defensive coach, you can deploy this guy and have him be your stud. But if not, I don't really see him being like a Micah Parsons or one of these guys who can, or even like an Abdul Carter from last year, where he can be both a linebacker and edge and live on both those planes. He has to be more of that hybrid style player.
Oh, so, darn. He can't be Micah Parsons or Abdul Carter. God, let's not draft this guy.
So, couple questions. So, this goes back to like a size matters conversation that we had earlier with Hopper. So, my understanding is Howell's measurements are going to come back in the single-digit percentiles on arm length. So, Owen, what are you assuming his arm length is?
I've got spring measurements on it.
Oh, you do you? Go ahead. Feel free to share.
Yeah, 30 and 3/4.
Oof.
Yeah. So he's got small arms. Like there's just no getting around it.
So that's kind of my question is that. Go ahead, Owen.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of the conversation we were just having. Like, yes, he's not Abdul Carter or Micah Parsons. That was more so the talking about guys who played linebacker and edge at the NFL level. And that's why I brought up that Harold Perkins comp was where like you saw LSU move him more towards being an off-ball linebacker because he has those size deficiencies. And the reason you don't just automatically draft this guy because he has that pass rush acumen, like a guy that we're talking about him in the same breath as Micah Parsons and Abdul Carter, is because he not only doesn't have like that prototypical size to play outside of pass rushing downs in those ways, but also like is his pass rush skill set going to translate because he doesn't have the length or anything he can tap into when he's in. Like when he wins the pass rush, it's because he's running around guys, beating them with pure like acceleration and bend and ability to bend and attack that athletically. It's not like that he's being this more technician on top of or have that power element to complement it. That's why I think he's more so back half of the first, in the second round, because you have the uber talented player that needs to be properly deployed, or you're not going to get, or you're going to have a guy like a Noah Spence who came out, and that's a name pulled from like 2015, who was like 6'1", 225 as a linebacker, but had like 12 sacks his final year in college, and was a decent player for the Bucs. But because if he ever goes to a different team that doesn't have that very hyper specific role for him to hide those percentile, like we're talking about percentiles if he's at an edge or percentiles if he's at linebacker. This has to be like a genuine, unique Cassius Howell position on your defense.
Okay. So that completes the players we're going through today. Again, Newt, it's great to see you back. You want to introduce yourself? Let everybody know about all of your draft content.
Yeah, so Newt Weston, good to be back. I've kind of been waiting for this. This was marked on the calendar just to kind of get back at it. You can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at NFL_Weston. That's going to be right now where I'm putting out a lot of my content. I've been trying to clip these guys a fair amount and share out some of the exciting plays surrounding them and what really attracts me to their tape and the things that I think they showcase really well. So you can find me on there. I run also ZeroTechDraft.com. Haven't been updating it a ton because I am just getting back into doing some of these player scouting evaluations. These are like the first 10 names that I'm getting eyes on their 2025 film. So that will be updated as we start to get further along in the college football season and then into the heart of the NFL offseason and draft season. But yeah, Twitter, zerotechdraft.com, a follow, a bookmark, any of those, greatly appreciated.
Owen.
Yeah, so you can find me. A lot of my content right now is going to be over here on the Draft Professor, obviously doing Wednesday nights with Newt at 9 p.m., running that old school team back. Newt got done over the summer doing some YouTube video content for my YouTube channel over at the Weekly Huddle. So now we're finally back together, podcasting together, getting this duo back together instead of me just listening to him talk to a microphone while I'm editing it and mess up the intro about 5 times, which I do have to make the supercut out of eventually. But
that's gonna be a wild one.
Yeah, but other than that, you can also find me here on Tuesday nights with former Buffalo Bills NFL offensive lineman Jerry Ostrowski breaking down draft profiles on offensive line players for the next few weeks as well. So I'm going to be on here twice a week. We're going to be doing some content on the Weekly Huddle. I actually was just texting these guys beforehand about a player that I'm interested in catching back up on because he has some great stats. And I think I'm going to make a full-time video on him. Don't hold my feet to the fire there, but I am getting a bit more freer with my schedule now. So I do think I can start putting out some more long-form content there. So I might be doing a full deep dive on a specific Mac player that I think could have some really high upside that you might see on a future episode of this podcast. We'll see how that plays out. But yeah, other than that, just follow me on here or on Twitter over at Weekly Huddle.
So it is really good to have both of you back. So welcome to the Draft Professor, everybody. If you haven't caught any of our podcasts, we're here at 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. Eastern every weeknight. And the schedule is scrolling down the bottom. The only thing that changes at each podcast is which position the podcast is covering and the players that that specific episode is covering. Owen and Newt next week will be covering these 8 players. They will be covering Quintavious Hutchins from Boston College, Will Helt from Clemson, Gabe Akis from Illinois, Tyreek Sapp from Florida, Zion Young from Missouri, Anthony Lucas from USC, R. Mason Thomas from Oklahoma, and Kristen Miller from Georgia. So that'll be the first time this channel has covered those players this cycle. So definitely looking forward to hearing what these two have to say. And Ryan Sparks, I see you in the chat. Owen and Newt will be covering Clev Lubin the week after. So that'll be November 5th. And I know that's somebody that Ryan likes talking about. So, but we're here, and from now until the end of the year, we're just diving deep into the draft class. Every podcast is going to cover 8 players, and by the time December rolls around, we will have confidently covered every player we expect to be drafted in rounds 1 through 5. So as people find new players, we'll insert them into a podcast. So just because they're not on a Twitter post doesn't mean they're not in the podcast. Because I think there was one tweet today and that player was actually replaced, but we don't always tweet out all of our changes because I actually have a day job. Kind of thing. So Red Murdoch. Okay. The linebacker.
Owen's boy.
It's going to be covered on a Friday show. And the people doing the linebackers on Friday are James Foster, Sam Teets, and Anthony Russo. So definitely appreciate Owen and Newt for showing up and doing their 1/7. We can't do Draft Professor without Owen and Newt showing up one day a week. And in this case, Owen's working double time. So if you did not catch last night's podcast, I think it's actually one of the better productions that the Draft Professor has ever created. You need to see Jerry and Owen discussing offensive linemen. That was definitely something that I found to be highly entertaining as well as informative on the offensive linemen. So for the 106 podcasters at the Draft Professor, for Newt Weston, for Owen, is it McCullough?
Yep.
Owen McCullough, Jim Wickens, thank you for watching. Have a good night, everybody, and we'll see you on a podcast again tomorrow.